Hey y'all, we're going to get started in just a minute. I usually like to give everybody a few minutes to join who RSVP'd or registered for the live. So I know we had kind of a handful of people that RSVP'd, so we'll hang on just a bit before we get started. Just a little bit of, I wouldn't even call it housekeeping, but just some updates. If you are someone who has downloaded or signed up for the course syllabus, then I did send out a couple of emails, and I've continued to send out emails to anyone who has downloaded the syllabus, because I know more people have signed up for it over the last few days. So you should have received an email from me, I can't remember if it was last night or the night before last, just kind of giving an update. So I sent a revised syllabus. I've also added that to the link in my bio. I did have to modify the timelines and just alter the dates a little bit because of some technical difficulties. And the technical difficulties being, I literally lost my SD card that I had filmed the content on that was supposed to be posted, and I have no idea where it is. So for context, I've been using my DJI Osmo Pocket to film my my lecture videos, and I just bought a brand new. If you have ever used like a micro SD card, this is how tiny the SD card is. So I had the original SD card that I had in my DJI Osmo Pocket, and I literally don't know where it is. This is a brand new one that I just bought on Amazon a little while back that I hadn't put any content on. And so if I can't find it by tomorrow, then I'll just go ahead and re-record everything. But yeah, I had everything on a teeny tiny micro SD card that was in my DJI Osmo Pocket camera that I used to film. And I don't know where it is. So the backup plan is to just re-record everything, and I'll have it posted and catch back up next week at the latest. But in the meantime, the show's still going to go on. We're going to do this live. I sent out a worksheet with an activity on there that's going to cover some of the content that would be in that video that I had filmed about the differences between biotech, clinical research, and pharma. So we'll walk through some of those items this evening. And we will also kind of talk about, or I'll give you some analogies or some real world examples of the differences between them to kind of help anyone who's interested in trying to figure out like what industry is going to make the most sense for them in terms of next steps, to just kind of help you have some exposure to why you might want to choose biotech versus pharma versus clinical research as your entry point. Or if you're somebody who's already in the industry and you're just exploring other options, then this also will be helpful for you to determine, okay, if I am working in clinical research now and I want to get into pharma, what can I expect in a career in the pharmaceutical industry? So that is what we'll be talking about. But yeah, if you've already downloaded the syllabus, then just drop a comment and let me know if you have downloaded the syllabus. Because I know I also have people that join my lives that are not, like, they just kind of like are scrolling through TikTok and join the live that way. So if you haven't already downloaded the syllabus, then the link is in my bio to do that. And when you download it, you'll get any email updates that I send out related to the syllabus, course materials. Sometimes I'll send attachments, like I sent the attachment for the activity that we'll be going through this evening. And if you don't have it, I'll send another email for anybody that signed up for the syllabus while we're on this call or while we're on this live. I'll send it out again afterwards. So if you already have it, no worries, but just know if I send another email with the same attachment, it's for the people who were not included on that previous email. But yeah, so I guess we can do a little pop quiz before we get started. And this will be based on the video that I posted previously. So if anybody knows of any pharmaceutical companies, I think that was your call to action or your task between the last live and this one, was to go and take some time to look into some different pharmaceutical, biotech, and clinical research companies. So If anybody knows of any or had an opportunity to look them up, drop the names of some pharmaceutical companies that you are now familiar with or have heard of already. And this will also give me a good idea of what everybody's understanding is as far as the differences between like pharma versus biotech companies. Because I know we talked about this before, but sometimes the terms are used interchangeably, even though there are some, I wouldn't say huge differences, but there are some key differences between pharma and biotech. So if you know of any pharmaceutical companies, drop the names of the ones that you are familiar with in the chat here, and we'll talk about those. And I think we should have my TA, Shai. She should be joining shortly. She may be jumping on a little bit late. And I know it is like Friday, so a lot of people are decompressing from work and from the work week and everything. So she should be on here shortly. I did see someone drop Pfizer, so that's a great example of a pharmaceutical company. Anybody know any biotech companies? If you know of any biotech companies or had an opportunity to do some research and learn about some new ones that you may not have heard of, then drop the names of those. And then also CROs. If you know of any CROs, you can drop those names as well. Okay, MedPace. Yep, MedPace is a CRO, so that is a good example of a CRO. I think they're based in Cincinnati, like in the Ohio area, but I've seen roles for MedPace that are based all over the United States. So that's another great example. Yep, Genentech, Johnson & Johnson, Icon, that's another CRO. Thermo Fisher. Oh yeah, you know all the CROs. PPD. Okay, yeah. So it looks like you guys already have a pretty good understanding of the differences between pharma, biotech, and clinical research. So that is a great start. IQVIA, Syneos, PPD, those are more really great examples of some CROs. Okay, so basically what we'll kind of kick things off with is just talking about what are pharma, biotech, and clinical research companies. So from the worksheet that I sent out to you guys via email, if you downloaded this syllabus, there were some fill in the blank responses on there. And so we're going to kind of talk about what the key differences are between pharma, biotech, and clinical research. So for pharma, in terms of kind of the cookie cutter definition, pharma are companies that develop, produce, and market drugs for healthcare. So when you think about some of those big names that you guys just dropped a few moments ago, like Pfizer, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, those are going to be your pharmaceutical companies. And so the way that I kind of like to think of pharmaceutical companies is like they are the chef that's running the entire restaurant chain. They have a menu, which is going to be like your pipeline. They have a bunch of different recipes, which will be like your standardized processes. So these are the things like regardless of what location you go to, they have recipes that are going to be used for the menu items. And then they focus on mass production. So when you think about McDonald's, you're going to have a standardized menu, which is going to be your drug pipeline that you can kind of think of that as. You have recipes. So even though some different locations and franchises may have certain menu items that others may not, you're going to have your standard menu item wherever you go, you're going to be able to get a Big Mac. So that's going to be like your standardized processes. And then they focus on mass production because they are the giants of the industry. And so then when we move on to companies that fall in the biotech sphere, this is going to be companies that are in the the definition here are companies that use biological processes and living organisms to develop therapies. So when you think about how you can relate that to everyday life, you can think of biotech as being an experimental chef in like a pop-up kitchen, for example. So these are the people that are going to be trying out new recipes, like putting together new flavors to try to appeal to their audience or their demographic. So kind of coming up with innovative treatments is what you think of when you think of biotech companies. And they're also more flexible, creative, and they take more risks. So if something flops, they may say, okay, people didn't really like that one. We're going to go with something else instead, or we're going to modify this just slightly because people did like this aspect of it, but maybe there's something more that we can add to this to make it a little bit better. So when you think about biotech companies, these are cutting edge therapies. These are innovative treatment modalities. A lot of them are going to be things like first in class products or new mechanism of actions in terms of the pharmacology and the way that the products actually work. And they're going to be a lot more willing to take risks. So these are going to be products where they're putting all of their human resources. So everybody on the team is focused on this one effort to get this product through, and they are going to be, popping off ideas in meetings. They're going to expect people to speak up and basically provide feedback based on their past experience, whether that is from a clinical perspective, whether that is from a healthcare perspective or a patient-facing perspective, to say, hey, here's something that we can do differently, or here's something that I did at a different company. Whereas you may still have those opportunities at a pharmaceutical company, but at a biotech company, they're usually more willing to say, hey, let's think outside of the box here and take things that we've done at past companies and see how we can kind of merge those things together to get this product to market as efficiently as possible. And then kind of moving on to clinical research. So the definition of clinical research are organizations, or CROs are organizations that manage clinical trials and research for pharma and biotech companies. So when you think about pharma being a chain restaurant, or like a chef for a chain restaurant, and then think of boutique style being that biotech space, you can kind of think of clinical research as being like an event planner. So pharma and biotech are going to be your hosts, but CROs are the ones that organize the entire event. So anything that's happening from start to finish, like your wedding planner, as far as like a wedding, they're going to be handling the day-to-day activities to make sure that on wedding day, everything is perfect, everything goes seamlessly. And so some examples that people put in the comments a little bit earlier were IQVIA, PPD, Thermo Fisher, Syneos, Icon, MedPace. Those are going to be the CROs that are responsible for handling those clinical trials and all aspects related to them. Now, that's not to say that pharma and biotech companies do not have clinical research positions in-house, because they do. If you were on the live session that we had last week, then Shai, who is a CRA and it has been working as a CRA for years, alluded to the fact that a lot of CRAs, ultimate goal is to become an in-house CRA for a pharmaceutical or biotech company, just because you do have, it's not as much of a volatile industry as biotech tends to be if you're working on the biotech side, or if you're working for a CRO where you are sometimes stretched very thin, where you're assigned to multiple different studies for sometimes different companies at one time. When you're in-house, you are working directly for the sponsor or the pharmaceutical company, and you have the opportunity to focus on programs specifically around a particular therapeutic area. So that really allows you to kind of niche down and become an expert. And again, not to say that you can't become an expert another way, but typically those in-house clinical research positions tend to be more sought after, just because of the stability that comes with them, the pay that tends to be a little bit higher versus working for a CRO, and just some of the perks that come along with working for a pharmaceutical company. Okay, I just got a message from our TA, Shai. She said she's going to be on shortly, so we'll let her, give her some time to jump on, but she will provide some context from a CRA perspective when she joins. So we just kind of talked about some of those key differences between CROs, biotech, and pharma. So now you guys have those definitions. And so now another thing that I want to kind of talk about is the differences in the size and the structure of each one of those that we just kind of went through. So in terms of, let me see if I think that's Shai. Hey, Shy.
Hey, so sorry, y'all.
No, you're fine. We were just jumping into things, just getting started. So we kind of started off throwing out some companies based on what we talked about last week, which were like what are some pharma companies, what are biotech companies, and what are CROs. So everybody did a great job of kind of throwing out some companies from each one of those. Different industries, and then we just kind of went through the definitions from that worksheet that I sent out last night. I can't remember if it was last night or the night before, but
Last night.
this week has literally been just flying by. But yeah, so we went through the definitions of pharma, biotech, and clinical research. And so now we're just kind of about to talk about the differences in the size and structure of each one. Because I feel
Okay.
like having that context with the differences in the size and just like the culture at each one can help people make a more informed decision about like what's going to work best for them depending on what stage of their careers that they're in. Um, because each one is gonna give you something different, which is gonna also it's gonna be valuable regardless of what experience you get. But it just depends on like the type of person you are, what kind of personality you have, and your learning style. That's gonna help you determine like okay, what's gonna work out best for me. So the first one I'll start with is pharma. So with pharma, just like we said, these are some of the giants in the industry. They're very large companies. So they tend to be very hierarchical, and they typically have a well planned, structured career path for you. So you come in, there's going to be a lot of upward mobility opportunities for you to move up in your career and get promotions. I see a lot of people that work in pharma get promoted often, and not to say like you're getting promoted every 6 months or so, but you're rewarded for the work that you're putting in. So whatever you put in, you get out of those situations in the pharmaceutical industry. In addition to that, you have a lot of resources. So these are the companies that are going to offer incentives like paying down paying your student loans depending on the company that you go to, or having programs where you can get an advanced degree if you don't already have one, or if you have one, to get an additional advanced degree, and they pay for it. They also have a lot of leadership programs. I've worked for companies where they have in-house leadership development programs where you can go from being in one department and you can join their leadership program and have exposure to C-suite mentors, where you can have direct access to some of those resources to network and really be able to grow your career. And just like a lot of the perks for working for a pharma company, they tend to have a lot more programs for people who are like internship programs, co-op opportunities on like the manufacturing side of things. Just a lot of structure. So if you're someone who's looking for that structure, I think pharma is a great opportunity, especially for new grads. A lot of people, especially like PharmD candidates or like people who are coming out of pharmacy school, there's like a huge push to go into industry. And so I know the process tends to be like you go to mid-year, or you go, if you're interested in like the Rutgers program or one of those types of programs, then you start the process, way before graduation comes around, and you go and do a lot of these like networking events, and then go through the process of interviewing for fellowships. And then there are the people who land those fellowships, and then there are people who don't. And I feel like a lot of people just kind of freak out and are just like, okay, all hope is lost. I can't get into industry now because I didn't get a fellowship. And that is completely untrue. There are a lot of different pathways that you can still go through to land a position in industry. But a lot of people don't really know about some of those. So I'll talk about a few of those. And then I know Shai can kind of speak from the perspective of clinical research and like the opportunities that exist there in the pharma and biotech and CRO space. From my perspective as a pharmacist, a lot of people don't realize that when you go to these large pharmaceutical companies' websites, they usually have things broken down into like early career, or like new graduate opportunities, and then they'll also have like more advanced or like mid-level career opportunities. I highly encourage anyone who is a new grad, even if, especially if you have graduated within the last 3 years, even. So even if you started working already and you are interested in a career in industry, go to those pharma companies' website, look at the early career opportunities. A lot of people don't realize that most of the large pharmaceutical companies internships are still available to people who have graduated recently. So if you are like within 1 or 2 years of graduation, I know for a fact that Takeda, all of their internship programs, if you look at the fine print in there, it'll say you can either be a new grad who has a few credits left before you graduate, or you could be someone who is like currently enrolled as a student, like maybe like junior, senior, or something like that. But you can also be a non-traditional intern applicant, and you can apply to their internship programs if you are looking to have, to make a career pivot. So of course, that means that this is not going to be like a full-time position. It'll be like 40 hours a week for, I think, like 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks or something like that. But typically they offer those programs, and when you get that experience in-house, it's much easier to transition into a role or an opening within that department that you might intern with. Or, if you get in there and you make those connections and network with people, you can land a position in a different department. Or even if you can't do either of those things while you're there and you're acquiring that skill set in whatever capacity that you're in as an intern, you have the opportunity to start applying to other companies or to contract roles. And now you have some experience under your belt that you can leverage to be able to land that position or to land, that next opportunity full time. The next thing outside of internship programs, so if you're someone who falls outside of that window of like 1 to 3 years post-graduation, there are also rotational programs. And I have quite a few colleagues and friends of mine who have gone through the rotational program route. So I know Genentech or Roche offers a rotational program. Gilead, I'm trying to think of a few that I can name off the top of my head that have them. I want to say Pfizer has a rotational program, and I know that GSK does as well. And so rotational programs are usually going to be either the same length or a little bit longer than fellowship programs. So usually fellowships are anywhere from like 1 to 2 years. The rotational programs tend to be, exactly what they say they are, a rotational program where you have the opportunity to work in different departments. So it's kind of like an extended internship in a way, where you'll start off in one department. For example, it may be regulatory, and then you'll stay there for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you'll rotate to quality assurance, or, they'll usually outline the parameters of what experiences you're going to get as part of that rotational program. But they end up being anywhere from 12 months to 24 months. And I've seen them fall between like 18 months as well, or sometimes even like up to 3 years. But I have at least like 5 people that I know personally who graduated, did not get a fellowship or didn't pursue a fellowship, and then decided they wanted to go into industry, applied for a rotational program, did that. And then I think at least half of them transitioned into a full-time capacity with the companies that they did those rotational programs with. And the benefit to both of those is at pharma companies, internships pay well. Like I've seen internships, like I know for Takeda, they pay like $35, $40 an hour for those for that period that you're doing the internship. And then for the rotational programs, you're usually getting paid a full-time like entry-level salary. So anywhere from like 65, 70 to $100,000 a year. And I know like one friend of mine, they paid, since she's a full-time employee as a rotational participant, they paid relocation expenses for her. So I think like her rent for just about like the first 6 months of her having to relocate to the new city was paid for, as well as like all of her moving expenses for her to get there. So a lot of really nice perks with the rotational route. The internship route, I don't believe that they provide like expenses if you have to like relocate to live, but it's just one of those things like high risk, high reward. So that's the perspective that I can offer from the pharma perspective. For biotech, in terms of size and structure, it's going to be a little bit smaller. So when you think of pharma companies, when you think of big pharma, it's going to be mostly companies that are greater than 25 to 50,000 employees, and they're usually going to be global companies. For biotech, some of them are global companies. Others may just be based in the U.S. and they may be conducting studies or trials in other countries. But with that being said, there's going to be a much smaller and collaborative environment because there are not 50,000 people to do all the work that's being done. You may see companies that are 20 to 30,000 employees. You may see 10,000 or less. You may see 1,000 or less. And I've even worked for companies like small kind of startup environment biotechs where there were less than 100 employees at the company which you can imagine everybody is going to have their workload to carry throughout the time that we're trying to, move our product along in different stages of trials. So, yeah, this is going to be much more of a collaborative environment. Like I was kind of alluding to a little bit earlier, this is the more innovative space. And not to say that pharma is not an innovative space, but they kind of have their tried and true methods. So when you think about pharma, usually these are going to be the therapeutic areas like cardiovascular, metabolic disorders, things that are very well known. And so they have a huge pipeline of products that have already gone through the process, and a huge portfolio of approved products. So they know the process and they know the regulatory requirements for getting those products approved. So, and they've done it, time and time again. So they can usually do it pretty easily, and they already have those relationships with industry. From a biotech perspective, these are going to be smaller companies. They're not going to have always a huge portfolio of approved products. So they usually try to hire in terms of their C-suite employees, and like their higher up, like senior management, are going to be, experienced industry leaders that have pharma backgrounds and have worked in big pharma, but now can come and share their expertise to help them think of innovative ways to get their products to market. So typically, you may have a handful of therapeutic areas that they focus on. Usually, you'll see a lot of cell and gene therapy. You'll see a lot of oncology products. You'll see rare diseases is something that's really big in the biotech space. And these are all, yeah. What'd you say, Shah?
Vaccines.
Yeah, and vaccines as well. And so when you think about biotech, I want you guys to just kind of remember that like the biotech space is going to be, they're looking to get their products to move through those processes and have as much interaction with, not necessarily as much interaction with health authorities as possible, but they really value those opportunities to meet with regulatory authorities, just because sometimes there may not be other products that are a head-to-head comparison of this product that they're trying to get approved. And so they're trying their best to think out of the box to make sure that their product has a really viable chance at being approved, because they're spending a lot of money and it's very much high risk, high reward. So that is my experience with biotech. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like in terms of specifics that I can offer. Like most of my experience has been in the biotech space. I worked for pharma previously, but most of my regulatory career has been in the biotech space. So I worked for companies that were like around 2,000 employees. I've also worked for companies that were around 500 employees. And then I've also worked for a company that was like less than 75 employees. I think there might have been like 72 or 73 of us doing everything. So you can imagine if you're at a pharma company, you're going to have an entire department dedicated to regulatory or dedicated to medical affairs versus at a biotech startup or like a biotech company that doesn't have any products approved. They're only going to be hiring the people that they absolutely need. And so that means you may not have a whole team. You may have 2 or 3 people that are like the regulatory team, or like 1 to 2 people who are doing everything related to drug safety and pharmacovigilance.
Now, I did have a question for you. Since you said you have mostly worked with biotech companies, I guess for like the entry level roles, are a lot of those roles remote? I'm asking because for my degree, a lot of my classmates, we go to the biotech companies, and a lot of those roles are in person, like actually doing the manufacturing and working on those lines to develop the drug. So,
You
are
mean
there?
like you mean
Go
as far
ahead.
as like, are there remote roles, or are they mainly
That are
like
more entry level? Yeah, I'm
um
not aware of many.
yeah. I would
Now, for
say, I
someone
mean,
with your
I definitely
background,
think the market is changing quite a bit. So like over the last 5 years, absolutely things have changed a lot. Like when we were coming right out of COVID, you were seeing a lot of entry level positions that were remote.
yeah,
Especially for for like regulatory is one of those areas where you really don't have to be in person, because the work that you're
that's
doing,
true.
you're sending a lot of emails, you're reviewing documents. It's nice to have in-person interaction. Like, it's nice to be able to go into the office and just talk to people and build those relationships, because it makes it easier to ask for favors when you need them. But it's not regulatory is not one of those areas where you have to be in person, especially strategy. I'd say labeling is more helpful to be in person, but not necessary. Ad promo is one of those areas that sometimes falls under regulatory, depending on the company that you're at. And ad promo, I think, is one of those roles where it can be beneficial to be in person because it is related to like promotional material. So a lot of things that are going to be, collaborating with marketing. So I think that can be helpful to have that collaboration to just kind of like talk through things and those discussions versus independent work that's being done. But so I can speak from that perspective, like regulatory. When I first got into regulatory, I was working completely remote. Over the last 3 to 4 years, I've noticed that there are more and more positions that are starting to creep into that hybrid space. And now, like a lot of them, they're not necessarily like in person fully, but they just want you to be local to wherever the headquarters is. So I've noticed a lot of positions are like now, the headquarters are typically in like New Jersey or in New York, or, for biotech companies, a lot of them are based in the San Francisco or like Bay Area, California. And for areas like RTP, like the Raleigh-Durham area, you see a lot of supplemental or like supportive roles. So I know like here we have a Gilead office, but they only have a lot of their supportive roles and their IT department is based there. So any positions besides that, they typically want you to be based in California where they're headquartered, unless it's something that can be done from home. And I feel like even with those positions that can be done from home now, they're not so much of entry level positions as they are like if you have 3 to 5 years of experience under your belt already, then they'll be flexible to remote. I think for a lot of those entry level positions, they do want people to be in person. Now, I think kind of like one of those workarounds is going to be contract roles. I think those are still like that's still one of those areas where you can get into an entry level capacity and get some experience under your belt and be able to work remotely. But that's going to be one of those things that's not guaranteed that it's going to turn into a full-time position, but it will be guaranteed that if you get the contract, you're going to get some experience under your belt.
Yeah.
So that's what I've seen. Of course, you have like you have medical information roles. I feel like those have consistently continued to be remote. And the only downside with like the medical information positions is I feel like they definitely tend to target those towards PharmDs. So because they already have like a doctorate degree and some clinical experience as part of like rotations and stuff like that, you can come out and get a medical information specialist or a medical information associate position. And those are usually remote. And the reason that they typically are remote is because a lot of times, like I would say, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but most of the people that I know that work as medical information specialists, it's more of like a call center type of position. And I don't want to say call center because like if you're at the house, it's not a call center, but like you're answering calls all day long. Like you have a certain amount of calls, like there's people constantly calling in. And so you're on a team and you're required to like, or expected to answer a certain number of phone calls, document those phone calls, and then hop back on another phone call throughout your shift. I'm trying to think of other like entry level remote opportunities. Medical writing. I hate throwing this one out there. Like, I don't know how many people actually really like that stuff, but me personally, I do not hate it. When I worked at Duke, I did a lot of like, I tell the story all the time, but like when I used to work at Duke, they had a handful of medical writers, and I know like when you're in the biotech space, they'll have like medical writers and they'll have scientific writers, and usually they're like independent of one another. They have separate responsibilities. When I was working at Duke, they had like a handful of medical writers, and so anything that they didn't have the capacity to do, and when I say the capacity, I don't mean like they didn't have the expertise to do it. It's just like if we had too much stuff going on and they already had their plates full, then the regulatory people would be the ones that were like helping them out with like getting some of those documents started and like authoring some of the informed consent forms and like the clinical protocols, like especially because like the physicians, the PIs, they would be too busy to do it, or like they would just kind of give you a overview and say, okay, yeah, like we want to monitor this and this is the patient demographic. It would be very like bare minimum, and we would have to go in and just kind of like beef it up and like set up calls with them to say, okay, so what about this? Or like talk to the CRAs, or like, what did they say about monitoring? What did they say about, how frequently they wanted, them to come on site, or like to get that information from them and write it. But I absolutely hated that aspect of it because it is so technical. Yeah. But again, that is another avenue. If you're someone who likes writing, who enjoys writing, is really good at it, those tend to be remote positions, and they make good money. Medical writers, because they're one of those things that people always need. So if you have some like writing samples that you can provide, or like anything that you've done previously, like manuscripts or anything like that from research, then those can be used as your writing samples for medical writing positions. They actually have a very unique interview, like job interview process as well. Like I think I did like interview for a couple of like medical writing positions when I was first transitioning, and like they very much want to see writing samples. You're going to submit writing samples, and then they're also going to give you some type of assessment where they're going to give you a prompt and say, this is the assignment, and we want to see you actually write, because like we want to see how you would perform in this role. So those can be kind of tough as well. Let me go through the comments. I know you got answered a couple questions. I work in Reagan, Texas, and it's on site. I literally had to fight for one work from home day the past 4 months. Lord. Yeah, I think it's definitely becoming more popular to, for companies to want people back in office and that type of thing. And I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, because I know everybody's like, well, if I can do my job from home, like, why do they want me in the office so bad? I like, from one perspective, I get it. But at the same time, it's like, from the perspective of being an employee, I also get that, okay, I can do my job just fine from home. Like from the business perspective, it's like they feel like they're starting to feel like they're losing money because they're paying for these, millions of dollars a year to keep the lights on in these huge buildings that they're headquartered in. And nobody's in the office for the past like 3-4 years. Nobody's in there. So, now they start trying to get chefs and offer all this like free food and free coffee on certain days and stuff. And like, then people might come in for that one day, but like they're still leaving early and going back home. And so it's kind of like, I like the analogy that I use is like, imagine paying rent for like, I think of it like, if you ever have been like dating somebody and like you paying rent for your apartment and you always at their house, like it starts to feel like, dang, I'm just spending $1,500 a month for nothing because I'm hardly ever at my house. So I think that's kind of like the mindset that companies have. So they're like, okay, well, we need to make it worth it, and these people need to come back in the office. But in my opinion, it just feels like, okay, maybe we should like close some of these offices and some of the other places that people are not going in at. But it is what it is. Okay, so somebody said, I think data entry and medical records are possibly remote entry level roles. Yeah, I think that would be, you really don't see a lot of those at the like on the pharma side of things. Like, and also like even on biotech, I can't even think of the last time I've seen like a data entry or medical records, just because the companies are so small. They're not hiring. They're going to just hire the people that they absolutely need, and they're going to find a way to sneak in all that other stuff as part of your job description.
I'm about to say those are job duties. Like, because even from a CRO perspective, you're not going to really find those roles either.
Yeah. But I would say like if you are working for an academic medical center in a clinical research capacity, they may have some of those like supportive positions. But again, the pay with those is going to be very much entry level as well. So the things I'm talking about are going to be like, okay, how you can find a position that's going to get you the most bang for your buck, going to get you some experience, and also like give you skill sets that you're going to be able to leverage in other capacities eventually. So I feel like data entry and just like medical records, it doesn't really give you a strong skill set that you can leverage to say, okay, like I now want to become a CRA after this, versus if you were to come in as an entry level like medical writer or like an entry level clinical research coordinator, for example, and then work your way up to CRA. Like those are going to be, that's going to give you like a more surefire path that you're going to be able to get there sooner. Now let's see. Any other questions that we had up here? Here from the Beast Kitchen video. That's my friend. She cooks so good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. the people that were there at the same time I was, they asked like to speak to her, and I think she had already left for the day. But yeah, I had a lot of recommendations to go there, so I decided to check it out today. I literally went like 1:30 in the afternoon. That was a bad idea because after that I didn't want to do anything else for the rest of the day because I was stuffed. And I literally left with a full plate of food. So that tells y'all how much food was on that plate. But yeah, I'll definitely have to go back sometime because I heard the turkey wings are good too. Let's see. I feel like there was another comment. There was something you responded to, Shy, about like MSL roles or something a little bit earlier. What was that?
You found it.
It was about like the requirements.
Yeah, the role and the path of breaking into an MSL role. I just let her know they typically want an advanced degree for that, like the NP, PharmD, MD.
Yeah. I feel like they're starting to include like MP and PA on there, but like, yeah, they were notorious for like a few years that they would just say like MD or PharmD. But I'm noticing now they've started to expand their reach a little bit more.
And typically those MSL roles will be remote, but that's because they do require a percentage of travel that can be, kind of like 50%. I've seen some lower, but typically the ones I've seen have been around the 40-50% range.
Yeah, they'll usually say on the job description, like if you scroll down to the bottom, it'll usually tell you the percentage of travel that's expected for them. And sometimes they will even tell you like, this is expected to be a field-based role. So you will be home only when you're not in the field. And when they say the field, they mean like whatever your region is. That means you're going to be going from state to state. Like if your region is like Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're probably going to be going to different clinics or like going to meet with different KOLs on those days. And then you may have, some days that you're not doing that kind of stuff. One of my good friends, like she's at MSL, and I know even in the times where she's not like having KOL interactions or is not traveling for the purpose of meeting with clinicians, she's usually at conferences doing continuing education because they want you to continue to stay up to date in the therapeutic area and be an expert in that area. So she attends a lot of conferences as well. And that's something that's a requirement. That's not like an optional thing.
So I saw her ask if you have a DMS or a DHS degree, if that was if they would consider that. I can't answer that. I haven't seen it before. I don't know if you know or.
I can't say that I have. I feel like honestly, as long as you can market your experience and show that you have the competencies that they're looking for those roles, then I would say like you don't have to limit yourself, but at the same time, they're going to value like clinical experience. And when I say clinical experience, I don't mean just like, oh, I've had a job at a hospital before. I'm talking about like that you were doing patient counseling and that you were like meeting directly with patients, providing direct patient care. Like, and usually that's like as an NP that you've done that, you've been a prescriber or you've been like an advanced healthcare professional in some type of capacity, and that you know how to evaluate medical literature. So you know how to evaluate a clinical study or a clinical trial results to see if, to understand like if it's good data that's coming from that study. So that would mean that you understand biostatistics, that you understand the difference between like superiority versus like a study that's non-superior, that you know how to interpret a head-to-head study. All those things are going to be important because as part of those like MSL interviews, you have to give a presentation. Like 9 times out of 10, you have to give some type of presentation to be able to demonstrate that you would be able to have those KOL interactions and that you would be able to do that on behalf of the company, because that's a bulk of what you're going to be doing with those KOL interactions. And I know that's one of those things that like kind of scares people away. And for some people, that's not a part of the curriculum. Like if you have an advanced degree, like I'm not sure like NPs and PAs, like if you take a biostats or like a biostatistics course. But for some people, that's one of those areas that they have to kind of get up to speed on. And so sometimes that means you have to do a little bit of work on your own to be able to build up that competency.
I think if you have the scientific background and knowledge that you typically get with the MD or a PharmD, that's really what they're looking for. I don't know enough about either of those degrees to know if they are scientific based.
Right.
So that's really going to be, because I know I've even seen like one, I think maybe like earlier this week, because I sent it to my mom, but they were even considering an RN. But, you know, it's just about having that scientific knowledge, because you basically are an expert for whatever that drug or product is. So,
Right. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Oh, somebody had said in one of your videos you said you left residency. Did you include in your resume? Initially, I did have it in my I did have it in my resume when I first was pivoting careers. So I just like, I mean, at that time, like I was in residency for like close to a year. So I included like my longitudinal project that I was working on, my MUE, like my medication use evaluation project. Also like worked on call while I was like a pharmacist in a hospital. So like I included stuff about like what my responsibilities were as like on call pharmacist. So I mean I had like it provided enough experience for me to be able to show like my clinical skill set. And then I also was doing like we had like journal club requirements. So like I was doing like I was talking about a minute ago, like with biostats and journal clubs and medical evaluation to determine if a product was going to be added to our formulary for the hospital. So I would be on like P&T committee meetings and things like that. So all that experience was pretty valuable. And it helped me to be able to land that very first role. I would say like after my first role that I landed in industry, or maybe like my second one, I think I just kind of rolled it off eventually. Once my resume started getting up to like 2 pages, I just kind of let it fall off. But initially I did include it and it helped. I remember like when I was interviewing for Duke, like they were just super intrigued with the fact that like at the institution that I worked at, I know some hospitals, they will like dose aminoglycosides for you, like vancomycin, gentamicin, and that kind of thing. They would dose it for you. Like at my institution, like the protocol was that we had to dose it by hand. So we had to do the PK calculations for dosing vancomycin. So any patient that was getting aminoglycoside or any type of like antibiotic that was dosed based on body weight, we had to like do those calculations by hand, and then it could be verified in the system. But like there were a lot of like checks and points for being able to do that. So goodness.
I see a question here. Do you think certs and memberships can compete with advanced degrees? Absolutely not.
Wait, what was the question?
Do you think certs and memberships can compete with advanced degrees? No.
Yeah, I would say so. I know a lot of people will say like, "Oh, do I need an advanced degree to land a role?" No. To answer that question simply, you don't need an advanced degree to land a role in the industry. But I feel like at a certain point, depending on how far you want to take your career in the industry, you may have to like dedicate that time to going back to school. Like now, my kind of rule of thumb or what I suggest for people, if you have the means to do so, is like if you already know that you have a marketable skill set. So, for example, I had a client that I met with a few days ago, and her background was in chemical engineering, and she was also currently in school for a master's degree for project management, and she was working in a program management capacity. But even though her background was as a chemical engineer, she did not want to continue to work as a chemical engineer. That in and of itself, she already had a marketable skill set. She can get a job in biotech, pharma, clinical research. She could even get a job in the medical device space because of her chemical engineering degree and because she's an engineer by trade. But if she didn't want to do that at all, like she could still leverage that to land a position in the industry. And then at the point where maybe she needs an MBA or something to like get to the next level, she could use the company's money to pay for that degree. That may not be the case for everyone. So there are people that may have like associate degrees. Like you have to have kind of that, not saying you can't be delusional, but you do have to have some type of like realistic expectation that, okay, coming from a background as a medical assistant, for example, or like a CNA, you can land a entry level job. It's very much possible to land an entry level job in the industry, but at a certain point, if you have your eyes set on becoming a senior director at a biotech company for clinical operations, at some point you're going to need to pursue some type of advanced degree. So whether that makes sense to do that beforehand or to get the job first, get that entry level job first, get your foot in the door, get some experience under your belt, and then have that company help you pay for that degree. Is ultimately subjective and like based on what your preference is. But if it were me, I would take my chances if I had a marketable skill set to land that role first and then see if I can get the company to pay for it. Because stuff is entirely too high right now to be trying to like pay for a degree out of pocket. And we don't even know what's about to happen with Sally Mae and all this kind of stuff. So I'm trying to like get myself in a bind for any more degrees.
Because I read it a whole different way.
Wait, did I answer that?
Well, I'm saying I like the way you interpreted that because I was thinking, and I could have been wrong, that they were asking would certs plus these memberships be able to compete with the advanced degrees. That's why I initially said no.
No, I agree with your answer. I agree the answer is no, but I'm like the way to I would say the way to navigate around that would be to kind of figure out what's going to be the best way to go about it depending on your circumstance.
Because you can still market yourself no matter what you have.
Right.
So don't worry about competing with anybody with an advantage. Don't worry about that.
I gotta plug my laptop in because it's about to die.
Those certs and those memberships are valuable. Yes, I do. But not for the sake of competing against somebody with a doctorate. I'm gonna be realistic. I don't see it.
Yeah, I know. I've seen a lot of or not even a lot, but I've seen like a handful of creators up here that will talk about roles and talk about like, oh yeah, like a lot of PharmDs are moving towards this area or moving toward like certain areas because they're tired of retail. I don't even think it's that. I just think at a certain point, you want to be able to utilize the knowledge that you've gotten a degree for. Like I have a PharmD, it's $150,000 degree. Yes, I would like to use it to its fullest capacity. So a lot of people ask me like, okay, why do you still continue to work part-time as a retail pharmacist and like do all this stuff? Like that degree was too expensive. Like I know some people, they're like, okay, like I'll just, marry rich and let a man pay for everything. As much as I would love to do that, I'm not in that predicament right now. So I'm not married. Y'all see, like I'm not married or anything like that. So right now I gotta pay the dues. And at this particular point in time, I'm gonna put the pedal to the metal and get everything that I can, like squeeze every bit of money that I can out of that degree and make it worth it for me. So I know some people like after they graduate pharmacy school, they're like, well, I just want to work in industry and I don't have a desire to work as a pharmacist, and they don't get licensed. I got licensed because it's nice to have something to fall back on. I've been laid off before, like from a biotech company, and it was nice to not even have to worry about like, oh my gosh, I have to rush and find a job, because I literally got, paid a huge severance because I got laid off. And then I had that money, and while I was getting paid severance, I could still go and work my part-time job that pays $75 an hour. There's not a lot of part-time jobs that you can go and get paid $75 an hour at. Now, would I do that full time? If my back was against the wall and I had to, yes, I would do it full time. But it's just like one of those things where it's nice to be able to have that security. So I definitely think it's worth it to get an advanced degree if you can, if you have the means to. I feel like you just have to be strategic and kind of think about like, how is this going to work for me? I don't believe in at all just like pursuing a degree and not knowing what you're going to do with it and just saying like, oh, I'm about to go get my master's just for the sake of getting your master's. You need to have a plan for what you're going to do with that master's if you're going to get it, because it's no need in racking up debt for no reason.
And I will say, I'm glad you're talking about the different roles for pharmacists, because I was originally on the pharmacy wave. Like I was going to go to pharmacy school, but I worked in a pharmacy for like 18 months. And the pharmacist I worked with, he just talked about how much he hated it. He had been doing it for years. I didn't even think of pharmacists being able to do anything else outside of the pharmacy. So I really appreciate you bringing additional exposure to this, because, girl, where was you at 5 years ago?
That's the reason. And it's like, it's crazy because the times that I do go and like work at my part-time job, like it'll always be like young technicians who are in high school still, or like they're in college, and they'll be like, you like being a pharmacist? Yeah, like I didn't go to I was gonna go to pharmacy school, but all the staff pharmacists and all the pharmacy managers, like they hate it. And so I just thought I would hate it if I yeah, like I thought I would hate it if I went to pharmacy school and I wouldn't be able to do anything with the degree. And so I always talk to them about like, no, you can go and work in clinical research and all these things. And I feel like it having that perspective and have providing that exposure for people, really opens people's minds up a little bit because a lot of people kind of have this narrow look or like this narrow thought process on what a pharmacist can do. And I feel like because there's that connotation that's often negative that's affiliated with being a pharmacist, it also expands over into the industry. So, while you see nurses and you see a lot of these positions in clinical research and stuff where they look for nurses, I look at some of these job descriptions and I'm like, I know exactly how to do this stuff too. Like in this role, they only are marketing towards a nurse, but this is something that a pharmacist does. But because people have this idea of like, oh, pharmacists only do this. They only count pills. They only sit at the computer and like put the prescriptions in the bag all day long. They think that pharmacists aren't capable of doing those roles when you think about the fact that like any drug that ever gets dispensed to a patient, whether it's in the hospital before your grandma that's in the hospital in critical care, like is receiving her meds and stuff like that, and all them IVs of medications that she's getting, a pharmacist has to approve those. So, a lot of drug interactions, a lot of things are caught because of the work that pharmacists are doing, but people only think like, oh, they just put pills in bottle. So that kind of bias has, spilled over into the industry space too. And for years, it made it really hard for pharmacists to be able to make those pivots. But now that people are exposed to the fact that, oh, they actually they are like drug experts. They learn about pharmacology. They learn about biostats. They realize that we are equipped to do a lot of these positions or to thrive in a lot of these roles. Okay. Well, let me catch up on some of the comments here. Okay, someone said, I've been applying for jobs with a 2-page resume, but haven't landed any jobs. What's the recommended page limit? I would say 1 page when you're first pivoting into the industry. Unless it's for an MSL role, then I would say you could probably go for 2, just because you want to be able to show like any publications, any research, demonstrate any clinical experience that you have, because that's going to be important. So you want to show that value add. But I would say for anything else, page to a page and a half at the absolute most. It definitely doesn't need to be over 2 pages. I know for a fact those recruiters are not going to read that. They're not going to read nothing over 2 pages, and they might just say no off the strength of it being 3 pages. Like with how hard the market is right now.
A lot of resumes, doctors' resumes. I feel like really only if you have an advanced degree, it doesn't need to be 2+ pages. I personally say 1 page as well. I keep mine to 1 page.
Yeah. Let's see. Someone wanted to ask again if we could request to join the live. Shy? Are we taking calling number 1? Are we taking callers?
I mean, don't get up here acting crazy.
Yeah. Please don't make me have to block y'all. No, I'm just playing. Y'all see how I had to do about them the people in my comments about the food videos earlier this week. I've never been one of those people who likes blocking folks, but
why after you had posted that video, I was going through my drafts because I be hoarding content, and I seen a video I had posted when I was on my trip, and somebody was like, "I can't do a 9-day trip. I can only do 5 days. That's my max." And I was like, but I didn't post it because I'm just like, I don't even got time. I'm like, okay, what you want to do with that? I'm still on my 9-day vacation. Like, ma'am, I can't do that with your 5 days max.
Yeah, it's like, and then somebody asked me this morning, like I know one of my videos, they were like, so you don't, did you not post the video because you want people to comment on it? And I'm like, I never said that people couldn't comment and put their experience, but like, my thing is, okay, if I post a video and say that I think the food was good, and then there's literally 100 people in the comments saying, oh my God, I love this place. The food is so good. The food is so good. The food is so good. And then somebody comments and says, yeah, I don't know why anybody would go up in them nasty restaurants. Like,
somebody say that.
I'm just like thinking to myself, okay, there's like, this is a chain restaurant. So it's like, I don't even know that the location that you went to is the same one that I went to. And so that sounds like a personal thing. Like, if it was dirty, why didn't you tell them people it was dirty? Why didn't you leave a review? Why didn't you ask for a manager to please, tell them your complaints? To come up here and try to say like, she don't know what she's talking about because that's the restaurants be dirty. Like, I have never ate nowhere dirty. Don't come up here saying stuff like that. But yeah, we'll if anybody wants to to call in, we will we'll accept a couple people if you want to ask some questions.
I see this question, Alyssa. I don't know, but do you know of any good part-time roles in the industry?
Not gonna lie, no. I would say the only part-time roles I've seen have been like contract stuff. I usually don't see like I don't see like stuff that's directly with the company. Usually it's gonna be like the contract type capacity where it's like you might be doing like 15 to 20 hours a week of work. But at the same time, like it's gonna be based on what the hours that they want you to be on. So it could be for a company that's based on the West Coast and they want you to work on like Pacific time or whatever. Um, so it's not going to be like a part time job, like one of those seasonal roles where you can make your own schedule. It's not going to be like that.
I think I have seen a couple at a few biotech companies, but it's for like in-person roles, maybe at like their donation center for like plasma or blood or something. You got it.
Let's see. Okay. I'm accepting Melody to call me. Hi, Melody.
Okay, hi. Are you guys able to hear or see me? I don't know if this is great.
We can't see you, but we can hear you now.
Okay, good, because as I said, like real crazy right now. I'm in midterms week, so a good little dusty. The one I want to say thank you so much for the office hours because this is very helpful. I'll just get like a little brief rundown, just so then this could probably help with you guys' answers. But I'm currently a third year undergrad. I'm getting my what's it called? My degree in biology currently. And when I came into school, I was like, and ever since like high school, it's like, oh, I really want to go to pharmacy school. But something that like has been a recent change for me is considering going to PA school. And while I've been here, like some of the concerns I've had with pharmacies that like I knew I didn't really want to do retail. I'm more of like a hospital based interested. I really love clinical like encounters being with patients. I just really like that contact with patients. So that's why I've always been more into like the hospital aspect of pharmacy. But some of the concerns that I've had is like the longevity of it, the difficulties with like pay increase that I've seen from like a couple of pharmacists, I guess like anecdotes whenever I look online because I don't have that many like access to pharmacists, especially like people of color, women of color like us. So that's why I really do love your TikTok. So I've been thinking about PA school, and while I've been here, I've been grateful to like visit a couple of biotech companies. Like my school has sent me out to Boston, San Diego, like kind of the big biotech hubs. Got to see Takeda. What is it called? Pfizer, like because some of the big companies, and also to like Switzerland to see kind of like the global health aspect of it as well. And as I'm kind of finalizing which school I want to go to, I know like regardless of which degree I want, I do want to end up in biotech at some point. Like I love clinical encounters, want to be in the hospital, but at some point I know I want to transition. But since this is kind of like a unique pathway, it's not what you would typically do if someone's going to pharmacy school. This isn't typically what you would do if you're going into industry. I've been having a little difficulty navigating. And one of my questions was like, given experience, like even if I do have X amount of experience in the hospital, would I probably have difficulties getting into industry? I know with PharmD, like typically in your case, you have been like an example of how you can transition. But like for example, if I did PA, I know I want to get my doctorate. So I think that's the example or question that I put in the comments earlier. But I didn't really know, like, would I have to then kind of start back over at like square one? I have to show them that I need clinical research experience or something like that. Because luckily, I am currently doing clinical research here in undergrad, and also conducting my own project. I'm going to be presenting in a couple of months, which I'm very excited about. But I just wanted to know, like, would it be too much of like a complete 180 turn, or like if I play my cards right, just show myself in a good way, show the classes that I'm probably taking undergrad that can apply, would it be okay? Because like you were saying, I want to be strategic about it and making sure I'm getting like the biggest bang of my buck with the degree that I end up choosing.
So, okay, just to kind of clarify what you're saying right now you're involved in clinical research. What type of capacity are you involved in, like as far as undergrad, as it relates to
I'm
clinical?
a since this past summer, I do a fellowship at my school, University of Chicago. So one half is I am in the hospital as a research assistant, but then the second half is like I'm paired with a doctor and I'm conducting my own research. And like currently, I'm looking at in an aging population how different like pharmacologies will affect them with physical therapy. So I have been trying to like incorporate pharmaceutical or like what is it called, medicine within my research as I'm kind of
Hmm.
navigating which path I want to take.
Okay, gotcha. And you said you're a junior, you're in your third year of
Yeah,
undergrad.
undergrad, yes. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say, I mean, now since you have clinical research experience under your belt, I would say that that's one of those ways that you can kind of think out of the box and be strategic. Is being thoughtful about the way that you about the experiences that you're getting. So if you already have your eyes set on like a role in industry, I think for someone like you that is already doing things that are going to like add experiences to their resume, it probably wouldn't matter which which direction you go. It's more so going to be about what the role that you're targeting is going to be in the industry is going to be like is going to determine what type of degree you would want to pursue ultimately. So if you do want to just stay in the clinical research or a biotech space and maybe work in like clinical operations or something like that, then I think it would be perfectly fine for you to continue doing like, clinical research, use that to leverage, going to PA school and then come out and, like even while you're in PA school, like do some internships maybe with some pharmaceutical or biotech companies, and then you'll be able to come out and land that clinical operations role. If you are looking for like a field-based position, where kind of how we were talking about earlier, like if you want to be doing those field-based interactions where most MSL roles typically target PharmDs, I my perspective would be like I wouldn't try to make it any harder for myself if they're already not really marketing towards NPs. Like it may be a few more years before they are like marketing towards NPs and PAs exclusively. So I would just go ahead and get the PharmD because you already know you're going to get that biostats experience built into the curriculum that they have for you versus having to go out of your way to get those experiences on your own and then try to like market yourself and fight for the fact that like for people to see that you do have that experience that they right now are only looking for from PharmDs and MDs. So I think it just depends on like what your ultimate goal is and like what type of functional area and capacity you want to be in. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think right now you're definitely doing the right things, taking the right parameters to set yourself up for success. Um, because I think if nothing else, like you can, with the clinical research experience, you can land a role in clinical research since you worked as a research assistant. I feel like it would be very easy for you to go ahead and get a clinical research coordinator or a CRA position, being that you already have clinical research experience.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. And I just want to clarify again, based off of what you said, if I was interested in the clinical operations, that's when I can kind of like use my research experience as of right now, probably work up to CRC or CRA, and that would be really good. But if I did want to shoot for the medical liaison, they typically only look at PharmDs and MDs.
Yeah, and that's not to say that they only look at them, but right now, like it's a little bit harder for. It's kind of like how I was saying earlier, like before they would only look at nurses were the only profession where they would look at all these like different, roles and say, oh, they're so flexible. They can do this. They can do pharmacovigilance. They can do, medical information. But now you're starting to see pharmacists like expand towards being marketed for a lot more of those positions. Right now, NPs and I would say NPs and PAs are kind of in that same space now where they are trying to expand their presence in other industries because NPs were or not NPs, PAs are typically like one of those supportive roles. So even though they are like an advanced practitioner or like an advanced provider, um, the I would say like in terms of biostats, I have friends that are PAs and I know that they did not have any specific biostats training. I think that's going to be the main thing that kind of sets you apart for one of those positions that is field based, and that's only going to be for the MSL role. If you decide to go into another capacity where it's like if you go into sales, like field-based sales, or if you do like health economics and outcomes research, like you can still supplement that experience and get into one of those capacities. It's really just the MSL role. So if like you literally are just like dead set on, I want to be an MSL, then I would say, yeah, like you might just want to think about, okay, look at those curriculums and compare them head to head to see, okay, what is the job description for MSL? What are they looking for? Which one of these degrees is going to give me a better chance at having that skill set? Versus if you're open, I would say now is a good time to start looking at more field-based positions, some of those other non-traditional roles like HEOR, market access, to see if those would be things of interest. And if you can accomplish landing those roles, you know, by looking at the curriculum and seeing if you would get that skill set from PA school, then it may not be necessary to go and pursue the PharmD. But as of right now, they do tend to lean more heavily towards MDs and PharmDs for MSL specifically.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much, Najee, as well. I also don't know how to leave this, so if you want to kick me out. And you'll probably be seeing more because, like, I'm telling you, I've been following your page ever since I found out about biotech. And this is like, I don't know how long, it's been too many quarters since then. But just want to say I'm a really big fan. Yeah, thank you so much again.
Yes, no problem. Okay, I think I figured it out. All right, perfect. Okay. Look, I was like, well, I hope you know how to get off because I don't know how to take off, but let's see. I think there was somebody else that had said they wanted to ask a question too. We can take a couple more people. If anyone else wants to.
Related to PharmDs that people ask. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to answer those because that's your lane.
What was the question?
Oh, because there's been a lot of comments. Let me go back to the first one.
Yeah, and I'm missing them left and right. Let me see.
I think the first one said, would you recommend going to pharmacy school?
Oh, yeah. I think I kind of answered that earlier with what I was saying. I don't want to say would I recommend it? Like, would I recommend it to anybody? No. But like, if I had to do it again, would I do it again? Yes. I would do it like 10 times over. Lying. I would not do it 10 times over. It was hard. It was very, very hard. But was it worth it for me? I would say yes. And if I had to do it again to, you know, be in the same space, then yes. Would I do anything differently? I mean, I think the only thing for me is like I went to pharmacy school in the South. So like I went to a school in Virginia. So they didn't emphasize industry roles as heavily because since we were in this, like a lot of schools that are like Northeastern and even Howard and like some of the schools that are closer to the presence of some of those pharmaceutical companies, they have more industry connections. And so, you know, they can send their students directly to intern at some of those places. The only connections that we had were ones of alumni who had gone to work at those companies and could now come back and advocate for us being able to have internships and land jobs and provide like referrals for us internally at some of those companies. And just kind of like mentor us and take us under their wings to say, hey, this is what you need to do to be a competitive applicant for those positions. So being that I kind of like went into pharmacy school with the mindset of this is what I want to do, like thinking I wanted to be a clinical pharmacist. I feel like it wasn't until my very last year of school, like when it was basically like time for people to make decisions, that I was like, maybe I want to go and do fellowship. But at that point, I didn't know enough about it to be a competitive applicant at that time. So I would say probably the only thing is like I wish I would have had more like exposure in terms of like resources sooner. But ultimately, I think it's on you, not in you, or it's in you, not on you. So like it's like one of those things where like if you got it, you got it. Some people like regardless of if they had all the opportunity in the world, but they just don't have the personality or they just don't have that like grit to be able to, you know, to endure, then it may not work out. But I'm like one of those people who can like just kind of make things happen. Like even if I get a no from somewhere, I'm gonna go and turn it into a yes, or like figure out a different way for me to get to the goal that I'm looking after. So I think it just also depends on your personality. But if you're one of those people who's like not gonna go out of your way and it's like needs that support to get there, then I feel like that is also one of those things that could help you determine what type of school you need to go to. Like if you're looking for industry opportunities specifically and you're someone who's an undergrad or like is considering going to pharmacy school, then I would say like that can help drive your decision of, okay, I want to go into industry, so I need to go to a school that has industry connections, because that's going to be something that you're looking for. You want to be able to join IPHO, industry pharmacist organizations. You want to be able to join like a lot of those organizations that are going to give you that exposure. And my school did not have those until like around the time that I was getting ready to graduate. So I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. Let's see. Someone said, isn't pharmacy currently oversaturated? I would say no. I look there. Literally, I get mailers in the mail from like every pharmacy, like every chain pharmacy known to man, like all the time, saying we need pharmacists. Like we do not have enough pharmacists. So I'm like, I feel like that was like one of those projections like 10 years ago where people were like, oh yeah, like robots are going to be doing pharmacist jobs by 2030. And that's completely not true, because there's so much potential for error. And so you always need like that final check, or, you know, that human interaction. And also you need human interaction for being able to counsel patients and do a lot of like MTM and like clinical work that pharmacists do. So I would say that no, pharmacy is not oversaturated. I honestly don't think it'll be oversaturated in my lifetime, maybe in 100 years from now, but in my lifetime, I don't believe that it'll be saturated. Also, this conversation is not specifically around pharmacy. This conversation is around like industry roles. So I would say like me having my PharmD and working in the industry is definitely not saturated in the life science industries for pharmacists. So I hope that answers. Maybe not as much in the South, but up north it definitely is. A lot of my colleagues, honestly, most of my colleagues, I'm probably like one of the few people that from my graduating class that lives in the South or like lives in this area. A lot of them live in like Cali, live in the West Coast, like live up north, and even like they say the same thing. A lot of them work part-time in retail or like hospital capacities because it's not oversaturated and they need pharmacists. So I would, kind of play devil's advocate with that perspective. The person who you mentored who had an HR background, did they start from an entry level position? I'm trying to think. I want to say I have to go back and look in my email, because I've worked probably with like 7 or 8 people that have backgrounds in HR. I feel like, so I know one of my clients who had an HR background actually went into like, I don't know if it's called instructional design, but basically she moved into a capacity where she was like creating the onboarding content for new hires. And I cannot remember exactly what that's called. Do you know what that title is called, or that job, Shy? Like the people, you know what I'm talking about? The people that put together the
onboarding, or I think training.
It's something training. But I don't believe that that's like a completely like entry level position. I think she still was able to like leverage her HR experience and the fact that she had some experience with like instructional design to land that position. I would say, it was probably about like 50-50. Like some people come in and go into a entry level class.
Their title is learning program consultant.
Okay.
But she basically does the same thing. I know her personally, so yeah, that's not an entry level role either. Like you said, that's something where she leveraged the experience she already had.
Yeah, and I would say like for people who have HR backgrounds, like if I had an HR background and I didn't hate HR, I would just go and like work in biotech and do HR in biotech.
A lot of money.
Unless you're trying to like do a complete like 180 pivot to something totally different, I would leverage the HR experience and just come in and do the same thing that you're doing, or and just get paid. Because depending on the industry you're coming from, you might get paid significantly more in-house at like a pharma company or a biotech company.
Yeah, I know someone personally who is transitioned to HR and she's making over $170,000 in HR. So
wow.
And assistants, yeah, she's getting paid. So
I'm like, especially if you know those degrees where you can use it in any. Oh, what'd you say, Sean?
I was saying that's what you were saying in one of our other lives, that sometimes depending on what role you're coming into, you don't always have to necessarily pivot, just change the industry you're doing that role for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's like a lot of, if you're like someone who has a background in like business development, or, have your MBA, or like works in marketing, or like any of those things where every industry has those roles, I would be looking to, if you don't hate your job or if you don't hate what you do, I would be looking to do the exact same thing, just in a different industry, especially if you're in like one of those spaces like where you just want more pay. You can always just kind of move to a different industry and do the same thing. Because that way you can still use your exact same resume, just kind of market and play up the skill set that you have. So I think the biggest thing would just kind of be to have an understanding of the industry, because like what the roles that you're hiring for in HR, or like, the things that you're doing in HR in one industry may be different. So it is still important to understand the industry.
Okay, did you see the other question about the certifications you would recommend for PharmDs? I can't remember if you answered that or not.
I don't think I did.
Okay, because I promised them that you would answer their PharmD questions while I was answering all of the other ones. So I just want to make sure we at least get to those last two.
Let me see here.
And so it's a certification recommendation for PharmDs, and do you recommend internships for current pharmacy students in industry outside of APPs?
I just scrolled up and I can't find the question. But so you said certifications or
certification recommendations for PharmDs, if any.
I think that's really just going to depend on the type of functional area you want to go into. I would say like for regulatory, there's really there's not any certifications really that you can do that are going to be like recognized across the industry. I know like if you've done any research on like regulatory as a functional area, you've probably seen the regulatory affairs certification, which is like the RAC certification. The thing about the RAC is you have to work in a regulatory role for a few years to even be able to sit for that exam. So it's not one of those things that you could like, I'm going to get my RAC certification. Like how some people want to go into project management. They're like, I'll just go get my PMP, or I'll just go get my green belt. And then use that and put it on my resume. The RAC certification, you have to work in regulatory or like a regulatory adjacent role for a certain number of years before you can sit for it. So that's like the only industry accepted regulatory certification. I think the same thing applies for like medical affairs. There's nothing like across the board for either of those. That's why I always recommend just doing the GCP certification. It's just one of those broad ones that I recommend for anybody if you don't have anything specific to the life science industries. The GCP certification is good. It's going to benefit you by providing you some foundational knowledge and just giving you an overview of some of the main things that go into clinical trials and clinical research and drug development as a whole. If you're interested in regulatory, the Duke Regulatory Affairs Training Program is a great one. That is kind of like on hold right now because I think they're about to transition from like a course that they were offering twice a year to like a self-guided course. And again, that's not like a certification where it's like, I'm certified in this now and it's industry recognized. It's kind of similar to the GCP where it's like, okay, this is just going to give you exposure to it. It's something you can add to your resume to show that you have some regulatory knowledge, but it's not going to be like, you're going to immediately get hired because you have this on your resume. And I think you said something about like the APPEs, like APPEs for.
Yeah, do you recommend internships outside of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when it comes to like APPE rotations, you have like most curriculums have a requirement of like certain rotations that you have to do, like internal medicine or like AmCare or, a community one. And so if you're interested in an industry role or like anything, life science industry related, that those things alone are not going to give you a skill set that is going to immediately make you marketable for like one of these life science industry roles. So I would say if you can get an internship at a pharmaceutical company, now it's great if you go to a school where you can get a rotation or like an APPE at a pharma company or a biotech company, then that's great. But if you can't, you still don't have to fret about it. I would just be applying to biotech and pharmaceutical companies. And honestly, like people are like, which one should I apply to? Apply to all of them. Like as a student, they know you're not going to come to the internship knowing how to do any of those jobs. Like the point of the internship is to, give you some exposure to it. So even if it's something that does not sound interesting to you, I don't care if it's like medicinal chemistry or, like a internship on clinical operations or whatever. Like, just apply to everything, and whatever you can get, as long as it's a pharmaceutical or a biotech company, it's going to be valuable, because you can market that up and just say that you work in the biotech or pharmaceutical industry in some type of capacity. And more times than not, that's going to give you the upper hand over other people who are graduating with their PharmDs and trying to land industry roles who have no experience in the industry. So I think that's kind of the best way to go about it. I was talking about this earlier. I'm not sure for the people who weren't on here when I was talking about the internship thing. And this is not specific to PharmD students, but a lot of pharmaceutical companies, like the large ones, if you go on like Johnson & Johnson's website, Gilead, any of the large, like, just like go to Google and search like big pharma, like top big pharma companies, and they'll give you like a list of the top 10 or top 20. You go on their website. Takeda is another one that I was talking about earlier. You go on their website and go to career opportunities and go to internships and stuff. A lot of them will be open to people who are recent graduates also. So a lot of people think like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a job in the industry, I'm doomed, and I already graduated. No, you can still apply to some of those internships, and they pay pretty well. I was talking about some of the ranges earlier. It's usually like 35 to 40 an hour for the big pharma companies. Biotech, sometimes a little bit less. But again, it's going to give you 4 to 6, sometimes up to 8 weeks of full-time, 40 hours a week experience working in one of those functional areas, and you can use that and leverage it for a role. And sometimes if they know that you are a non-traditional candidate and you've already graduated, sometimes that can facilitate a full-time role, or like you coming into the company full-time after that internship ends. And the chances of that are actually pretty good, because I know quite a few people personally who have gone that route. As a matter of fact, one of my mentees, he's usually always up here. And I'm going to see if I can get him to join like one of the lives at some point while we're going through this kind of like series. But he actually graduated from pharmacy school, I think it was probably like 2 years ago now. But he like found me here on TikTok and was, I think he joined one of my lives, and I was talking about the same thing, like talking about internships and stuff. And he lived in an area where it was not prominent for biotech or pharma companies. So he was like, okay, well, North Carolina is pretty close to me. I'm going to apply to jobs or like internships in the RTP area. He applied to internships. He ended up getting one. The internship was after he had already graduated. So he graduated in May. The internship started in June. He moved to North Carolina. He had to get a lease and everything for an apartment, but he was just like, okay, I'm gonna just trust God and cross my fingers that, and work hard and network while I'm here doing this internship to see if I can turn it into a full-time role. He did the internship. I think it was like either 2 or 3 months. And while he was doing the internship, he was networking and everything. There were some positions that opened up at the company, and he applied to them internally while he was there, but I think they were already in the process of like interviewing other candidates. So the internship ended up ending, but because he had like done so much networking and like just going to like different events, like while he was up here in the Raleigh area, he ended up meeting somebody that was leaving their current company, and that role was opening up because they were taking a new job. And so they were able to like move him into that position at that company. And it was like a small biotech company. He was able to come in and like, start full time, like less than a month after that internship ended. And so, yeah, everything worked out. And I think even like while he was like during that time where like the internship ended and he was getting ready to start, or he was still like, trying to figure things out, I ended up like referring him for like my part-time job at like the community pharmacy. And he ended up having like, since he wasn't licensed at the time, so he ended up working there as like a pharmacy, like a grad intern during the meantime, like while he was like going through the process of interviewing and everything. So he never went without a paycheck, is what I'm saying. It might be a non-traditional process. Like it might be one of those things where it's not what you plan for, but like things can and will work out. But it just takes, you just being strategic and making sure that you're putting in the work. Because again, this all came from like networking and just like making connections and just him going on a leap of faith and saying, okay, I'm gonna move to this city and do this internship and, not know if I'm gonna have a job afterwards. And I know not everybody's in a predicament where they can do that kind of thing, but it is possible. Let's see, how long do you recommend? What time is it now? It's 9:29. So we're gonna take a couple more questions before we jump off of here. And we will be on next Sunday at 8 p.m. We're going back to Sundays after this. Only reason we moved this one was because of the Super Bowl tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Sunday. How long do you recommend to stay in entry level roles before trying to move into the industry? I would say a lot of these things are subjective. I would say that's one of those things that's subjective. It's really just going to depend on when you feel like you're confident and you feel like you have a skill set that's marketable. For me, my first role after like pivoting from healthcare, like pivoting from being a pharmacist to industry was by way of clinical research. So I always say like, oh yeah, like my first job was at Duke in their School of Medicine in the Office of Regulatory Affairs and Quality as a regulatory affairs scientist. That role gave me a lot of like strong foundation. And because it was a small team, I talked about how I was doing regulatory, but I was also doing medical writing. I was also teaching, and I was just like also the director of the regulatory affairs training program and doing all these things. I caught on very quickly. And because I was like still pretty early out of school, like I was one of those people that was just like really driven and motivated. I was there for like a year and a half. And then at that point, I was just like, okay, you know what? I think I have a hang of things. And I went back and referred to the job description that I got hired with. I went and kind of like went bullet point by bullet point and said, you know what? I actually know how to do every single thing that's up here. So I kind of like use that as an opportunity to promote myself and say, I am fully competent. Like, I believe that I'm fully competent on all these things that are on the job description. And when I was there, they had like specific like specifications for like when you could be up for promotion. I think it was like, you had to sit for the rack exam and like pass the rack exam to even like be considered for a promotion. And at that point, like if you know anything about the rack exam, you know you have to either choose to take the drug or devices rack exam. And I was handling both drug and device projects, and I didn't really know which one I wanted to hone in on. So I was like, I don't like nobody's gonna tell me that I gotta take the rack exam to be promoted when I already am looking at all these qualifications and I know how to do every single one of these things. So I just made a decision to say, okay, if another opportunity presents itself and it's what I'm looking for and it pays the right amount, then I'll move into that capacity. So that's what ended up happening. I turned on my notifications on LinkedIn and said that I was open to work, and recruiters started like pouring into my inbox with different roles. So I like interviewed for some of them and ended up finding one that I liked, and I took the job, and I got paid like the salary was like $30,000 more than what I was doing at Duke. And the workload was so much less that I would literally get all my work done in like 2 days, and the rest of the week I was literally doing nothing. So it ended up working out. But yeah, I think it's subjective. I think it just depends on what your preference is and like how good you feel about your abilities to do the job once you get in there. Did you graduate from NCCU? What you talking about, Shot? You said she did, but I did not. Who graduated from Central?
No, she did not, but I did. He's talking about
Oh.
Yeah, girl, I ain't even looked at the profile picture, but somebody said go Eagles.
Oh.
And I know she didn't go to NCCU. She don't even look like she did. I'm just messing. I know her.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions that we had up here. Perfect. I thought this was really good. Let me actually go through. Okay, so we went through some of those definitions on the form, on like the worksheet that I sent out yesterday through email. What I did want to kind of go through real quick is so we went through the fill in the blank portion. There were some questions that were up there that I wanted to go through also real quick before we wrap up. If I can find where I put it at. I'll just have to go back to the emails that I sent out to see where it is. I don't know where it is.
What you looking for?
That email that I sent out yesterday that had the worksheet, and I had sent the attachment. So we did the fill in the blank portion earlier. There was a match the role to industry one. So there was like 5 questions up there. So it was just basically kind of like matching the job titles to the industry. So the first one was CRA. And so basically I wanted you guys to match the role to what industry it will fall under. So CRA, technically the answer would be clinical research. It will fall under clinical research, but how we talked about a little bit earlier, there are in-house roles. So it technically could fall under biotech, pharma, or clinical research, but primarily clinical research. The next one is regulatory affairs specialist. This one is also going to be one that can fall under either biotech or pharma, because regulatory is one of those roles that exists all the way across the drug development spectrum, and even after the products are approved. And it also can appear as CRO companies too. Usually they'll call them like study startup specialists or like regulatory specialists, but regulatory affairs can also appear in the clinical research space too. Next is medical science liaison, so MSLs. This again is going to be typically pharma. It's going to usually be big pharma companies that have the MSL roles, but if a biotech company has products that are already approved or products that are close to approval, then they will sometimes like have MSLs in-house. And then even like a lot of people don't realize this either, but like CROs sometimes also hire MSLs, and they will like, use those MSLs for companies. The next one is data manager for clinical trials. Obvious answer there is that's going to fall under clinical research for data manager. Again, there may be some in-house ones, a few in between, but usually that's going to be in clinical research. And then bioprocess engineer. Now this one is usually going to fall on the biotech side, because that's going to usually fall under like manufacturing. So these are going to be people that work on site, like at the manufacturing facilities for bioprocess engineers. And so then in section 3, we had the real world scenarios. So we're going to kind of walk through those really quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So the first scenario is you're working on developing a new monoclonal antibody therapy using living cells. So what industry would that one fall under? Anybody want to take a stab at the answer? Biotech, pharma, or clinical research? You're working on developing a new monoclonal antibody therapy using living cells. What would that fall under? Yeah, so the answer to this one would actually be pharma. So anybody that said pharma is correct. And then the next scenario is you're managing clinical trial sites and monitoring patient data for new drug studies. What industry would this one fall under? Pharma, clinical research, or biotech? If you're managing clinical trial sites and monitoring patient data for new drug studies. Everybody's getting this one correct. So that's clinical research. Okay, the next one is if you were part of a team launching a new over-the-counter medication globally, what industry would that one fall under? This one's kind of tricky, actually.
I was about to say, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the answers, we got some from all over. So this one would actually, I think technically this one would kind of fall under more so pharma, just because we're talking about globally. If you remember earlier when we were talking about how pharma companies typically tend to be the ones who are global. And if we're talking about an over-the-counter medication, like this product has already been on the market for some time, probably offered as prescription initially, or possibly offered as prescription initially. And so if they're converting it to over the counter, then that means it's probably a pharma company that has this product in their portfolio already. So that was kind of like a tricky one, but And not to say it couldn't be a biotech. Like in some scenarios it could be, but the primary answer here would be like a pharma company. Okay, got two more. You oversee compliance with FDA regulations for a company producing generic medications. So what would this one fall under? So for generics, what would be just broadly, just any type of generic medication? Okay, so we got CRO. Anybody else want to take a guess? Okay, so this one is actually going to be pharma also. And so kind of like the reason for this one is like regulatory compliance for generic medications falls under pharma companies. And they manage like branded and generic drug production. Just because they
I've been stuck on number one. So number one was pharma, because I got that wrong.
Wait, what did I say the answer to number one was?
You said pharma. I thought it was biotech.
No, it is bio.
Okay.
Yeah, it is biotech. My bad.
Okay.
Sorry. Flag on the play, everybody. Flag on the play.
No, I don't know everything, so I be trying to be educated myself.
No, because based on the definitions that we went over earlier, if you're working on a monoclonal antibody, because if you're thinking about like any type of like rituximab or any drug that ends in MAB is going to be like a monoclonal antibody, and so if it's derived from a living organism, then that's going to be a cell-based therapy, which would usually fall under biotech.
Okay.
I thought I had said biotech. My bad. Okay, number 4. Hold on. Number 4 was specialize in scaling up the production of a cell-based therapy. That one is biotech also. So cell-based organisms, cell-based products. Cell and gene therapy we were talking about earlier are going to fall under biotech. Monoclonal antibody, anything innovative, any of those like innovative type products. Okay, and then we went through, overseeing compliance with FDA regulations for generic medications. That's going to be pharma. And then the very last one is your job is to collect and analyze trial data for a new drug being tested in multiple countries. I think this one's pretty straightforward too, because it kind of has the answer within the question. Okay. Yep. So clinical research, that's correct. So data collection, analysis for any type of like global multinational trials. That's like basically the core function of clinical research or contract research organizations, because they're managing the trials on behalf of pharma and biotech companies. And I think that was everything that was on the worksheet. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, this was really good. Thank you guys for interacting. Thank you for commenting. If you haven't already, if you missed any of the previous lives, I'll be uploading those like the full length of the live on YouTube. So I'll probably have this one up by tomorrow, because I have to just have some time for it to actually download and save it and then upload it to YouTube. So if you came in late, if you want to watch it later, we had a call-in caller where we answered some questions live. We went through all the answers and stuff. So what we will do is we'll be back on here next Sunday and all the Sundays after that until we go through the rest of the course. I was telling you guys earlier, anybody that was up here a little bit earlier. Yeah, Shy wasn't up here either. But so I was using my DJI Osmo camera to film the videos that I have been posting about these topics and stuff. And so my SD card, I had to buy a brand new one because the other one I lost. Y'all see how small this SD card is? I literally don't know what happened to it when it came out of the camera. So I do not really want to have to re-record all like the videos that I have recorded for this week, but if I can't find it by tomorrow, then I will just do that. And so please forgive me for the delay in putting those videos up, but we did cover a good portion of the content that was going to be in those videos about just understanding the differences between the different industries and stuff. So you guys did a great job with that, but those videos will be up this upcoming week at the absolute latest. We'll be back here next Sunday for live. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to leave a comment on any of my previous videos, or you can send me a DM or send me an email. If you haven't already downloaded the course syllabus, the link is in my bio, and that's the updated course syllabus that I sent out to anybody that was already subscribed to the course syllabus yesterday. I sent that out with like some modified dates and stuff because of the whole technical difficulty issues with the SD card. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I really enjoy you guys being up here and asking questions, and having Shy here to provide some clinical research perspective that I don't have. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have some guests soon. I'll reach out to a couple of people that I know that work in some different functional areas and see if we can get some other people on to share their experience. So thank you guys for joining, and we'll reconvene next week. All right, bye.
See you later. Bye.